fun. Okay, in the first part of this video, what we are going to do is I have a dirty airbrush right here. It has the Wicked Blue Violet in there. It's been in there for about an hour, so it has sat for a good while. Started to build a little skin. And I was going to show you guys what I do with for my dump cup and what I'm spraying. So I like to keep this, I usually keep this under my desk. It actually slides directly underneath my tabletop now. And it is a fairly large Tupperware, and then I keep a sponge on here. And the reason I do it this way is this sponge sits in there under friction and it doesn't sit on the bottom of the dump tank. So what happens is it winds up, the sponge dries up. I used this earlier today. As you can see, I'm not getting any moisture, so it doesn't build up any mold or mildew as if you were laying this in there when you start building up water in there, because the air can get around this and it dries out. So easily, the other thing I have is a spray bottle, and I have a good spray bottle. As you can see, it sprays a good strong, not in the spray pattern like this, but in the stream pattern I use. So when I'm doing a quick color change, I'm going to flip my cup or brush upside down, and then I'm going to spray in here. You can actually, if it's really dirty, I'll get in here tight with that spray, and it kind of jets things out. Spray in some water. Now I'll spray through the airbrush onto the sponge so that I'm not just spraying that all up into the environment. As you can see, the cup is pretty filthy. So what I'll do is I will put a little more water in there. And if it moves around easy enough, great. I will take a bristle brush and start breaking that down on the side. Just using water at the moment. If it gets too bad, if that skin builds up too much, we can start to use some solvents. So since these, as we break this up off the side, you'll see it's going to break big chunks. What you don't want to do is pull back when you're breaking up these big chunks. I like to use lint-free paper towels when I get a situation like that. And I'll pull. Most of that will come right out. Now, in this case, as you can see, some paint has dried inside the bowl. So if I did not have any paint dried inside the bowl, I would just spray out. And then since I have my sponge here, it won't hurt my needle, I can do my bubbling like that. Do that a couple times. As you can see, the water is getting cleaner with each pass. Now, if I was just doing a color change, I probably would just let that skin stay in there and not worry about it. But since we have a little bit of skin in there, the easiest thing I found, iso alcohol. That was a little more than I meant to put in there. Usually I just put a drop or two in there. Move the iso alcohol around. Sorry, I hit that camera. And then I can get in there. Make sure you don't hit it with the metal part of the paintbrush, but I'll get in there and twist around a little bit. Make sure I'm breaking everything up and getting around the needle. The other reason I also keep that sponge up there is if you were spraying that down into your bowl, see how it sprays that water around? It'll start to splash up on the edge if you were spraying and start to make a mess. The sponge catches all that. And of course, like I said, it'll dry up and come back in a couple hours. If you squeeze that out a little bit, come back in a couple hours, the sponge will be dry completely. And this would probably be all I would normally do in a normal basis. That's it. I'd add some water to it. If I was coming back to paint tomorrow, that would be good enough. Then we can go and at the end of our day, we can take this and go dump that dump cup out in the kitchen sink.
I don't think so, mister.
Okay, so the next step, if you want to take it to the next step and completely clean your airbrush, let's say you're going to be going away for a while, or if you don't paint every day, first thing, before you start to do anything else, make sure you have no liquid left in the cup. You do not want to retract the needle with liquid in here because liquid could come back and get into the air trigger assembly. The air trigger assembly generally doesn't need cleaning, but if you drag any dirty water or paint or any solvents back there, it will cause the O-ring to swell up often. And that is usually the biggest complaint on, say, the Iwata Eclipse, is the trigger gets sticky, and that's because people pull them back with a dirty needle. So we want to make sure we've removed all of the liquid from the airbrush. Then now we can retract the needle. Now, some people will say retract the needle and add liquid, but at this point right there on this airbrush, that far back, the needle seal is no longer stopping liquid from flowing back into the brush where it shouldn't be. So you do not want to have the needle retracted this far and do any cleaning. So we're going to remove the needle. As you can see, there's still just a little tiny bit of blue violet on there. So that means we have some residual residue. And we can just, with a cloth, I'm using, of course, a shop cloth, we'll wipe that down. If you have a removable head, be it an Iwata Eclipse or a Micron or a PS270 or 289 like I'm using here, or, you know, a harder and a steam back, then we can pull the nozzle off. Now, often what people want to do with these type of nozzles or heads is remove the nozzle. You do not want to remove the nozzle, unscrew the nozzle from your airbrush any more than you have to. So in order to get in there and really clean that nozzle out, I could take a striping brush, dip it in a, gotta have some liquid. I'll dip it in a cleaning solution. This cleaning solution right now, I'm using actually ethyl alcohol, which is a strong solvent. Ethyl rubbing alcohol. Regular rubbing alcohol would work fine, or a mild cleaning solvent would be okay as well. Then I'm going to run that striping brush through there, and it will actually run all the way through. I don't know if you'll be able to see that. And some other brushes will come out the other side. Now, it is important before you do that, you make sure there is no paint, no large amounts of paint left in the nozzle area, because if there is, you could push the paint further up in there and create it to be a hard clog. But since I knew I had flushed this out very well, I knew that wasn't going to be the case in here. So sometimes you might even have to use part of that. Now, if you have an airbrush that does not have a removable head, or like the Iwata Eclipse where you could pull it out. Same thing with the Iwata Eclipse. I would pull the nozzle out and I would just run through it, swipe it with a brush. And if you have the kind of airbrush that threads into the body, I suggest you get a really long striping brush, run your solvents through, but make sure it's really, really clean first. And you should be able to, by putting your brush in there, after you've wiped that brush off, you should be able to tell if anything comes off after you stick it back in there. It comes back clean, we know we're pretty clean. And I will still flush that at the end when I get done. But now that I've got that off, oftentimes you can take that striping brush and run through this chamber right here. But you want to be careful with solvents there, because in these particular brushes, you of course have an O-ring. So you want to be really, really careful using solvents. I'm not concerned about EA in a short period of time doing anything to that, but it is something to keep in mind.
Working at the car wash, yeah.
Often people will use cotton buds, Q-tips. And I have no problem. If you've got the head off like this, I have no problem using one and getting in here and swabbing out this last little bit of debris. It will definitely take off. See how what that's pulling off of there? It will definitely get that last little bit of residue from inside. However, they tend to shed. And if you get some of those fibers in there, say I still have the nozzle assembly in there, if some of these fibers were to break loose and you clean this airbrush while the nozzle was in there, it gets trapped inside that nozzle area, it is extraordinarily difficult to get out. All right, guys, that's going to wrap us up today. The next video, I'm going to talk about how I fix one like this where I've got the needle is stuck on it because we left some paint in it. She's a dirty girl, and I love her. But anyway, guys, I will have to catch you on the next one. I'm Bill Kennedy with the Airspace. We appreciate you for stopping by here. Y'all have a great day. Bye.